All
Yeah.
right, 2.5 stars, really?
What?
I caught you. I saw it on Letterboxd. 2.5 stars. All right, let's discuss.
Okay. All right. We can have a real combo.
Of course. No, look, here's the thing. No matter what, love or hate, we made the movie. It's
Yeah,
not going to be for everybody, and I
that's
would
fine.
much rather have a conversation about what you didn't like or what didn't work for you. Because, the thing is, at the end of the day, cinema is subjective, like
Yeah.
right above you, there's a 4 star, right below it is a 1 star.
Yeah.
And the thing that is frustrating for filmmakers sometimes when they hear the word like, oh, it was fun and it was a blast. You go, what did you really think? And
Yeah.
not that we're prying for it, but I think it's a more fun and fascinating conversation. Cut the bullshit. Let's discuss.
All right. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you doing this. I yeah, it's always interesting stepping into a conversation because most of the times when I do this, well, for one, I can tell you that I had to leave the festival early and for a lot of different reasons.
Of
And so
course.
my headspace is not exactly correct. But watching it, I grasped onto a lot of greatness. And those were the things that I wanted to talk about in
Of
terms
course.
of like what may not work for me. It could be a thing of just, I need some time with it.
Of course. Well,
And
here's the thing.
I,
Like you're bringing in your own baggage to the
sure,
movie. I can't fault you for that. Like,
yeah,
or if anything, some people don't like these types of movies.
yeah,
And there's nothing wrong with that at all. What I'd love to know what worked for you, and
yeah,
then look, as long as the thing that like I think all of us as filmmakers or even creatives is if you just hear that sucked, well, why? What sucked
yeah,
about it? I don't know. It kind of sucked. I'm like, all right, but why? What didn't work for you? And I love hearing that stuff. I'm not a masochist,
yeah,
but like it always helps the creative process when you know what works. Because we didn't have a testing process for this movie. This
yeah,
festival tour has been the testing process in a way. The only thing that's different is I can't go back to the producers and say, look, guys, the color timing is not working, for audiences here. They don't get the fact that we tried to deliberately make it look like a Skinamax movie, and they're gonna go, oh well, that's what it is. But like it's interesting to see it now, having been kind of doing the festival tour and being in the audience for it, because that doesn't happen all the time for
yeah,
filmmakers. It just goes out into the ether, and you hope and pray that it connects with someone.
yeah,
By the way, I'm just going to say the fact that you have a rad poster is so rad. Like,
yeah.
I'm more of a BMX Bandits fan myself,
Yeah,
but
hey, I have that on VHS over here too, along with Reanimator and everything else. Like
see,
I'm a Lovecraft fan, so
that's where like I'm fascinated with the discussion, is that a lot of the films that we looked at with this were films that I originally saw on VHS. So what was interesting was to see how my perception of movies like Single White Female or
mhm.
Last Seduction that I saw on VHS looks now or plays now, in the, I guess, the modern like point of view that we have when we look back at movies and try to have the same kind of perspective of it the way that people did back then.
Yeah,
VHS both did us a favor and almost a detriment in a way. So
sure.
anyway, I can go on this
Yeah,
forever, so I'm
yeah,
gonna let
yeah,
you
that's fine. I wonder if we could just dig a little bit into our psyches a little bit,
sure.
because that's the effect that your film had on me. So it caused me to question my reality and the ground underneath my feet a bit in a fun way, so you don't have to worry about me. But this idea of exploring outside of body experiences here, could you relate that feeling to the work that you do as a storyteller and artist? Because you're having to adopt the mind, take on the mind of your characters, your collaborators to articulate the narrative and the characters' headspaces visually and
Yeah,
sonically. And we can just go down the list, but I'm just kind of curious about your relatability to it.
that's a great question. In terms of like out of body or body swapping or just being outside of your own flesh, that's something that every filmmaker goes through when
Mm-hmm.
they're in the process of making a film, and then especially when you're in a theater and you're watching the kind of fruits of your labor, or the just the choices that you made at a particular time, in a particular moment, that might have been incredibly well thought out and then thrown away, or spontaneous in the moment that you didn't think of in that moment. And then being able to see that, like, in an out of body experience, when you're floating, up in the air, and you're watching an audience watching it, or even just being in the theater and seeing your life, whether it's, on camera or off from the other side of the screen, being played out. It's incredibly surreal. And I've, done it a couple times now. And, most of the films that I've done, I've been able to at least see it a few times in a theater with an audience. It's different at home a little bit, but when you have that collective audience experience and they are reacting to the things that you created or the choices that you made, or not, it is very surreal. So a lot of that was stuff that I took from my own experience, having those out of body experiences, and tethering it and infusing it into the story, more than I even thought until recently, when we kind of watched the finished film. I think all filmmakers in one form or another, infuse their own personal lives into the movie, especially since it's filtering through. It's a game of telephone. Like, you're taking the story and it's filtering through your brain and it's coming out the other side. And hopefully, you have the wherewithal to be able to tell that in a way that is, hopefully either satisfying or entertaining, thought-provoking. The thing that, and this is why, and I'm sorry if I, challenged you right up front.
No, that's fine.
It's like, if nothing else, even if you don't like the movie, if it sparks a dialogue, if it sparks a discussion, that to me is more gratifying than, rave reviews or, boffo box office. The box office wouldn't be bad, but because then it's like you're making, a return on your investment, and someone will let you do it again.
Yeah.
But I miss, they used to call them coffee shop movies, where you'd go see the movie and, you weren't just going home and going to bed, or just kind of plopping down on the couch and then just watching Seinfeld before you lull to sleep. You want to have a discussion with people about those movies. And, a lot of the filmmakers that influenced me making this film, like, obviously Stuart Gordon, who was one of the first filmmakers that I wanted to have a discussion with other people in my class or my friend circle, which there weren't many at the time when that movie came out. No one wanted to talk about Reanimator. They wanted to talk about the next Arnold Schwarzenegger film, which there's not much to talk about. Whereas there was a lot of things going on in a lot of Stuart movies that I didn't know how to process, and I wanted to have that conversation with. And now these films are considered classics. So once you get past the chaff of this being a masterpiece, let's talk about the sexual politics and From Beyond. I want to be able to have the discussion on, the power struggle in Stewart's movie King of the Ants. But other filmmakers like Cronenberg and Verhoeven and Claire Denis, Michael Haneke, all of these filmmakers that knew how to push buttons in a way that allowed the audience to formulate their own opinion, whether you like it or not. But, I had more discussions about sex and relationships with my dad over The Fly. And I don't think anybody going into that movie, when that first came out, was thinking that they were going to get, a tragic love story with a lot of sex politics in, with all the goo and the Chris Wallace special effects. There's a lot more under the surface. So that was something that I had to kind of relinquish that sensibility of, look, whether you enjoy the film or it doesn't work for you, at the very least, if it holds a mirror back on you and allows you to go, what are my sexual fetishes, or what are my gender politics, these days, back when you were a kid. Obviously one of the reasons why we wanted to cast older actors in these roles that could have easily been people in their 20s and 30s, but it wouldn't have made sense. But I wanted people who lived a life. I wanted Heather's character to be someone that isn't just this, nubile young, professional that had to be a Doogie Howser to get to that point in her career. No, she's written books. She's had a long-standing relationship with her husband,
Yeah.
enough where when she makes those fateful choices, it is coming from a different place than the usual, like, well, it's just this hot new character just comes into their life. It's coming from a place where I think a lot of people can relate, and if they can put themselves into her shoes, maybe they can kind of reflect on their own lives and their own sexuality a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's why I appreciated Jonathan's character
Oh,
a bit, because there's a certain point where you think that he's operating a certain way that you could kind of say, I know that kind of person. But then there's a sequence that happens maybe a little more than halfway through,
yeah,
involving, you know where I'm going. And I was like, whoa, I was not expecting him to say that. Now I'm leaning in a little bit.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, and that was something that I talked to Jonathan, because we had worked before
Yeah.
together on Creep Show, and he was playing a very traditional, like, alpha male Western archetype and stuff, and that's kind of, Jonathan is a strapping older man, easy on the eyes, and boy, he could pack a punch. But when I explained to him that we were taking like film noir tropes and turning it on its head, where instead of a femme fatale, we had a home fatale, if you will, and the doting wife at home. Well, you're going to play that character. And he got so excited over that idea and really allowed us to kind of push that archetype in ways that, when we were challenging his own sexuality or challenging his own sexual proclivities and his own fetishes. One of the proudest like lines that we kind of threw in there was that moment in the beginning where he's like, I worked out, I went to the gym, I had 3 rejections at a job, I cried in my sleep, and I came home and I made a nice branzino for you.
Yeah.
Those are the things that like Anne Archer would have said if this was Fatal Attraction back in the day. But no matter what, as long as I'm home cooking dinner for you, then I'm happy. And the fact that we were able to have Johnathon Schaech, who is for all intents and purposes like an alpha male, being able to play a beta character, those were the sort of choices that I was excited that we were able to make in this, that I don't think we would have been able to get away with if we made something a little more commercial or conventional. Who knows, maybe something with a bigger budget or at a studio. I think they wouldn't have allowed us to have that opportunity.
Yeah. What's your relationship with poetry or even visual poetry? Because one thing I really liked is how the spinning camera
Yeah.
that you do, it appears all throughout. It never feels cheap. It always feels like, oh, I'm really getting pulled into this feeling of disorientation.
Wait, so how long do we have? Because I want to make sure that I'm talking.
Yeah.
A couple extra minutes, right?
2 minutes, but
Do I have something right after? Okay. Do you mind going for a little longer?
Absolutely, that's fine.
Dude, like, I'm not holding you up or anything, because I'm really enjoying this. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that when we first were coming up, like, once you get a script and you get it into a good place, like, whenever I read a script, I'm immediately writing little notes down, little visual ticks and stuff. And I'm a huge Brian De Palma fan, as you probably could tell. I'm ripping off him, ripping him off wholesale at points. I knew that I wanted to kind of employ some of that visual language, because some of the movies that we were watching, like Dress to Kill, Femme Fatale, Body Double, these were movies that played with the sexual identity and politics, ideals, but they were also De Palma movies, and you can get away with split diopters and split screen and everything, and a lot of dynamic camera moves. And once I knew that I was going to employ, a lot of style into this, in certain cases to be the medicine, like the sugar make the medicine go down, but also it felt like because she's telling the story, I felt like I could use a lot of the visual tricks of movies that she probably watched when she was younger, whether it was 80s and 90s Skinamax movies, which is why we deliberately tried to wash out everything that was in like her story, as opposed to the bookending parts. There's a lot more contrast in those scenes, whereas the middle stuff, we tried to make it look kind of drab for for particular reasons. I don't think if everybody gets it, but that's why we did that. But the spinning camera, the one thing that I remember writing in the script when I first read it was life spinning out of control.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something that when I went back to my notes, I remember seeing that note and going, why can't I, as long as I'm putting it in the right spots, why can't I employ a visual technique that shows someone's life spinning out of control? As long as there's a visual anchor for that, for the two moments that I can think of in particular that we use it, for one, in the middle of the story, during one of the sex scenes, here is one character who we haven't, we've just discussed before with Johnathon Schaech. Here's someone whose life has now been spinning out of control because who they thought their wife was is not necessarily who their wife is, so to speak, but also that maybe they were holding back something sexually from the husband-wife dynamic, which is where he evolves later on. So that spinning out of control idea was something that I was like, I need to, you may see it, coming from one personal point of view, from the person that's telling the story. Mm-hmm. But this is another character whose life is going to change forever. And that makes sense. And then towards the end of the movie, when it gets used again, there was something also about Lovecraft loves to use spherical iconography, or circles, and the order of threes, things coming full circle. There was a lot of that, like lyrical iconography in a lot of his prose, and I thought, if I'm going to be creating circles, which was something that Dennis wrote in early on, that they're always making smoke rings, I got to use it again. And if we're going to be spinning someone's or multiple people's life out of control, then that is the perfect moment to be able to get away with those moments, So like, as much as I tried to be as aware of where I was using the style, like, it was always incredibly, because we did not have a lot of time and a lot of money to make this. So I had to come in incredibly prepared. So I did storyboards for all of those scenes so that you can come in, show it to the crew, and they go, okay, instead of going, we need to discover, let's spinning shot. If you're coming up with that on the day, more likely than not, you're not gonna get it. But I needed to kind of vet that, like, to the point where I was actually, when we were getting footage in, my editor and I would cut the storyboards into those scenes that we shot already to make sure, like, there was a spinning shot that we had another one, and I cut it out because it didn't make sense from a character standpoint. I think it's always important to make sure that you're coming up with these cool, funky shots, as long as it makes sense in the narrative and also for the character. So I'm glad that you picked up on that.
Yeah, because otherwise, if you had, hit the ball as it lied, so to speak, or just let the camera capture what it, there's comedy movies that make fun of it, where they're like, there's the cinematic moment, then they pull back and they remove the music and the editing and everything, and then it might be,
what's the point?
Yeah, like, it might look kind of silly to see someone convulsing on the floor or whatever it may be, but that really just pulls you into the mind of the character.
The psyche of it. Yeah. I'm glad you picked up on that.
Yeah. Well, I know we're out of time. I hope we can pick up this conversation. As I said, I have some friends that you may know, like Peter Martin and Brian Kluger, and we do podcasts and things like that. So I'd be happy to continue the conversation. And
absolutely, dude. Seriously, like, I'm glad that we had this conversation, and I'd love to converse more, because we only touched the surface on, like, what worked, but let me ask you one question. What is one thing that you can look back and go, what didn't work for you?
Well, I mean,
don't pull punches. That's totally fine.
Okay, that's fine. I'll just speak very honestly in this moment that I just finished your film, walked into this, and I just know that this is one of those films, because of how disorienting of experience it is, that it's going to be a journey film. That's why I said at the top that I was like, it may hit me one day, and I'm like, you know how many movies I have over here, Rad included.
Yeah.
You think that's a 5-star movie? No. I just love it.
But that's
Stephen King
that's
movies
great
over here.
Some movies are way homers, where like, experientially, especially like when you watch it on a screener, sometimes when it feels like work, there's something about it where you go, like, but what if I was in a theater, or what if it was a couple years removed from, like, the initial release?
Yeah.
maybe, maybe if you revisit it, who knows? We'll see.
Yeah.
I do think that there are certain things in it that like almost, and this is such a douchey thing to say when you're a filmmaker. It's like, no, trust me, on the second time,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm gonna
No,
really hit you, man. But I think there are things that like now that you've seen it once and you can kind of go back, especially if you're, a Reanimator fan. Did you notice the hospital?
oh yeah.
Good.
Absolutely.
All right. I'm glad, because some people were like, oh, no way. But like Mace
Yeah.
Jr., his dad was the security guard in the first movie. Have you ever seen King of the Ants?
No, I heard you mention it, but I need to. I have heard of it.
Definitely watch it, because it's
Okay.
Stuart Gordon doing a revenge movie. It's great. But there were like, it was fun to be able to bring all these people from Stuart's like troop, so to speak, and kind of bring them together. There's a God, it sounds such there's a lot of layers, man. Like the fact that we had this conversation is great. And if there's any follow-up, I'm more than happy to have that conversation. Would be lovely. And yeah, if you ever give it another shot, let me know what you think.
Yeah. Well, just to be fair, I did not plan to write or add to Rotten Tomatoes knowing that I needed to think about it a little bit more and get my headspace clear, because when I do an interview, I'm latching on to the positives.
Of course. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Seriously.
Yeah.
Thank you, Preston.